Thanks, Senator Ossoff. Well, in fact, the FAA and yourself acknowledge that there need to be changes and reforms to make the FAA a stronger oversight mechanism.
It's a major priority of mine, yes.
I want to come back to how you do that in terms of compelling culture change. And you mentioned that Boeing is under a cap 38 aircraft a month. In 2018, Boeing built as many as 52 planes per month. But that production rate was significantly impacted by supply chain disruption during the pandemic. And since then, Boeing's rate of 737 production was significantly lower, as you know. In fact, on average in 2013, Boeing produced about 21 planes per month. So 38 planes per month is well above what they would be producing anyway. How is that a kind of disciplinary measure?
So we have the cap in place to drive the kind of analysis and work that a safety management system would normally produce. So at this point in time—
But they're not producing fewer airplanes than they would otherwise. How does the cap get their attention, so to speak?
Because Boeing is quite aware that they're not going to increase production on any of these aircraft that are now being measured with these 6 KPIs, unless those KPIs are in the green and they're stable and they have a plan for growth that's in the green. And that's the kind of behavior you would expect from a company with a robust SMS system.
But wouldn't it be more effective if it were significantly lower?
We haven't seen a need to lower that. Boeing lowered production on their own, which we wanted to encourage. We didn't want them to feel like they had to keep the number high. But having said that, we are in the state now where we are monitoring these KPIs with them on a weekly and monthly basis, and they're very aware that they need to keep those in the green to produce more aircraft.
Well, I would submit culture change is not going to come with these kinds of, forgive me, half measures that in effect impose some hypothetical cap that the company is nowhere near meeting for years and years. You won't have change when the effect of the cap won't be felt for years and years. What other measures can you do to achieve culture change?
Well, the culture change is going to come through a lot of employee outreach and education programs. And
but you don't do education.
We don't, but we oversee their efforts in this regard, and that's part of the comprehensive plan.
Well, let me submit, and I'm going to take a page from Senator Hawley's book here. If the CEO had his compensation capped, or hers, and if those caps applied to management across the board and deep into management until culture change were achieved, rather than some imaginary cap that will apply only years from now, wouldn't that have more of effect, that is capping compensation and making it conditional on culture change?
And that would certainly be beyond my authorities to implement. But what I can assure you is that Boeing will not be permitted to increase production on aircraft until those KPIs are in the green and stable.
But if you set a lower production rate and you said to shareholders, the only way you're going to increase production rate from 5 aircraft a month is to cap employee compensation, and you can do that right away, or you said that to the CEO, you might not be able to direct it or order it, but it would get their attention.
Yes, sir.
I'm just saying there are other ways perhaps that the FAA can be proactive and aggressive rather than reactive, in my view.
And we'll certainly look at that.
More than a decade ago, the FAA proposed a fine against Boeing, as you probably know, for installing what are known as non-conforming parts. They're parts that don't meet the design or quality specifications. In 2021, the FAA settled several enforcement actions with Boeing, again, for installing non-conforming parts on aircraft. In June, this subcommittee shared accounts from whistleblowers, including Sam Mohawk. He's currently a Boeing quality assurance investigator in Renton, alleging these practices are still occurring. That is, the use of non-conforming parts. The memo we released earlier today validates what those whistleblowers have been saying. The special audit conducted by the FAA earlier this year found several instances of alleged noncompliance relating to Boeing and its supplier, Spirit Aerosystems, practices of documenting and handling non-conforming parts. Could you tell us what actions, if any, did the FAA require as a result of the alleged non-compliance during the special audit, and were those actions completed?
So with respect to whistleblower complaints, of course, those matters get investigated separately, but the part management generally was a finding of the audits, and like as was tool management, in both of these areas, there are technologies that allow significant improvement in how these things are tracked, both tools and parts, and Boeing is deploying those technologies as part of the comprehensive plan.
What assurance have you received that they're employing those technologies? Because I'll tell you, according to the letter that I received just yesterday from Sam Mohawk, and I'm going to make it part of the record without objection, Boeing still hasn't complied with the year-old FAA order intended to address some of the non-conforming parts issues. So my question is what you're going to do to make them comply.
Yeah, happy to look at that information. My understanding is that the part and tool technology is being piloted now on the factory floor, but that of course has come to a halt with the work stoppage that's in place. But the plan was to complete the pilot program and then roll it out system-wide.
So it's only a pilot program so far?
It's any new technology like this would start as a pilot and then be rolled out after the bugs are out of it.
Has the FAA ever considered suspending Boeing's production certificate?
What we have done is take away the right to write airworthiness certificates. So that's the thing that gives us the most control over the aircraft, not only in making sure that we control the rate, but it also has Boeing giving us an aircraft that they're declaring to be complete, and then we do a separate inspection to re-inspect the aircraft.
Let me ask you about whistleblowers. We've heard from more than 15 of them over the course of just this investigation, and there are many more complaints before the FAA about behavior that they've witnessed or practices that they saw occur in Boeing. Many of these whistleblowers are not informed about the results of investigations that are conducted as a result of their complaints made to the FAA. They have to submit an FOI request, and it takes at least 9 months, sometimes longer. Why did the FAA decide that whistleblowers were no longer entitled to the results of investigations spurred by their complaints?
My understanding of the process is that is there to protect not only the outcome, but the identity of witnesses interviewed and the like. But I'm happy to take that back and see if there are ways to make that process work better.
Well, the identity of witnesses could always be redacted, right? And to the extent there are other kinds of classified information or whatever, it could be removed as well. But to give them no results unless they file an FOI seems counterproductive because it discourages them from coming forward, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think it's a fair point, and I will take that as a to-do.
I know you have the authority to conduct unannounced audits, don't you?
We do.
Do you routinely?
There are various types of audits. The kind that are largely paperwork audits, reviewing quality assurance manuals and the like, tend to be scheduled so that we can get all the paperwork and the right people in the room. The audits that take place on the floor of business processes and the like tend to be unscheduled.
But you routinely give Boeing notice before the audits. I'm told that no less than 48 hours.
They can be spontaneous. We do audits with no notice.
How often?
I can try to get a breakdown for you on that.
I would appreciate it, because I'm told that that all of the audits, in fact, are done with prior notice to Boeing, and the result is that, in effect, they clean up their act.
No, I do know that there are audits that happen just from walking the floor. If an inspector sees something, he can go over and ask to see where are your business instructions and what's the source data and where are the tools and all those types of things. So that they do happen spontaneously, and that's one of the advantages of having inspectors on the floor.
Let me ask you, do you look for or investigate retaliation when it's alleged by Boeing whistleblowers?
If there are allegations of retaliation, we refer those to the Department of Labor, who does an investigation. But we are certainly emphasizing with Boeing that there needs to be a non-retaliatory, non-punitive process in place to have that safety culture that they need.
Does the FAA consider retaliation in its assessment of Boeing's safety culture?
Absolutely.
And do you agree that retaliation has an impact on whether future whistleblowers come forward?
Absolutely.
When was the last time you took action against Boeing because of retaliation?
I think that rests with the Department of Labor for specific acts of retaliation.
I'm sorry, the Department of...
The Department of Labor investigates retaliatory actions.
And you refer those
We
cases?
refer those, yes.
How many have you referred?
I'll have to get that information for you.
Well, I would appreciate that, because, you know, again, part of the whistleblower complaints to us have been that the FAA has failed to consider retaliation as part of the safety culture and has failed to take action when retaliation has happened. So I would appreciate that additional information.
I will do that.
And again, also the information about unannounced audits,
Yes, sir.
how often, and whether it's a matter of policy that you do it. Have you looked at alternatives to ODA?
So ODA is happens mostly on the design and certification, in the design and certification process. There's actually fairly limited designation of authority in the production process itself. The most significant delegation of authority happens with the right to issue airworthiness certificates, and we have revoked that from Boeing.
As you know, I authored a number of provisions that were included in the Aircraft Certification, Safety, and Accountability Act, which included one provision to study ODA and, among other things, identify improvements to ODA or options for transition to an alternative certification program. And Congress mandated an expert panel review of ODA. I was disappointed and didn't mandate that there be alternatives to ODA considered. The expert panel, though, concluded and released a pretty scathing report detailing 9 recommendations for the FAA to carry out of more than 50. In February, you testified before the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, quote, "We've tasked Meter to give us a view on what the options are. I think it's important that we look at all options on the table and understand how do we make changes that are going to give us a different result than we've had." Has that study been completed, and will you commit to sharing its results with us?
That study has not been completed, but I will certainly share those results with you.
What is the status of the implementation of the 9 recommendations?
I don't have information on that, but I will also provide that to you.
Is the FAA planning any additional changes in oversight of Boeing based on the expert panel's recommendations?
There have been a number of panels. The Part 103 panel has come up with a series of recommendations as well, and all of those recommendations have informed the comprehensive plan. But that plan is also a living document, so we're always looking for improvements or other ways that we can improve oversight.
You mentioned that Boeing has a comprehensive safety plan. It was submitted to the FAA in May of this year. I am a little bit skeptical that Boeing's plan will make any meaningful improvement unless there is strong oversight and intervention by the FAA. That culture change simply isn't going to come without a significant push by the FAA. And that safety plan contains recycled information and more promises, empty commitments Boeing has made for years. For example, testimony to the NTSB confirmed that the, quote, key performance indicators, which you mentioned, are comprised of data that Boeing has had and tracked for years, and the FAA reached a settlement agreement with Boeing in 2015 that included many of the exact same commitments. Boeing is simply recycling its safety plan. Why does the FAA think Boeing will do anything different if it's simply recycling the same promises and commitments?
So it's a valid question, and I think it's not surprising that it's some of the same KPIs because it's some of the same problems that exist at Boeing that existed before. That's why we're doing some things differently this time with the inspectors on the ground, with the KPIs, and with the production caps. And of course, the Department of Justice is also looking at installing a monitor to ensure compliance. So we are aware of the failures last time and in previous times, and we intend to hold them to this.
Well, what I would appreciate from you is an action plan, a set of requirements that maybe look like they can't be fulfilled under the current trajectory of quality and safety, because they are more demanding than business as usual. I think that the business as usual approach, the reactive approach, is doomed to failure. And you have an opportunity, in fact, a moment here, as still a new administrator dealing with a new world for Boeing, because it is a company that is staring into the abyss of possible failure. And it's a crisis of its own making, not the thousands of hardworking, skilled people on the assembly lines, but its management. And in fact, those workers on the assembly line deserve better from management, and so does the traveling public, because even if they are close to highly skilled production at this point, the traveling public may still have doubts, and that will undermine the confidence of airline travel as a whole. So I am hoping that we can hear from you about more specifics. Some of it you've promised to provide. I am still looking for alternatives to ODA. I know that the FAA has revoked Boeing's ability to issue airworthy certificates for the 737 and 787 aircraft, meaning that at the end of each aircraft's assembly process, you, the FAA, not Boeing ODA employees, decide whether to allow the aircraft to enter service. But I still have serious concerns about the independence of Boeing's ODA employees, the independence, not their skills or competence, but their objectivity and independence if they're paid by Boeing, even when the FAA performs the final inspection. What I don't understand, maybe you can explain, how can FAA airworthiness inspection at the end of all the manufacturing process catch problems that occurred during the build process on the assembly floor if they're not detected in real time at that point?
Well, there's a fairly extensive checklist that they go through with each aircraft. So that does include some invasive testing and examination, but particularly being able to get underneath the passenger area and up above, they're able to do a pretty thorough inspection.
I'm also still concerned about whistleblower protections. I think the FAA needs to do more and do it more quickly and more effectively. We've talked a little bit about how it can. And I'm hopeful that the information about audits and whether there's prior notice will be forthcoming. You've agreed to provide it. I think that none of us want Boeing to fail. On the contrary, we want Boeing's success. We need it, as I said earlier. And the FAA has a vital role in safety, as you well know, but I think being more aggressive and proactive and forcing a change in culture means the FAA sometimes has to be the bad guy here. It has to compel change and make sure that we're not just recycling past commitments and promises that have proved to be empty at the end of the day.
Yes,
so
sir.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate your being here. The ranking member promised that we wouldn't beat up on you, and we are on the same team, I hope, insofar as we have the same objective, but our investigation will continue, and we hope the FAA will be a positive partner in this effort.
Absolutely, sir. No, we will do that, and we've got a list of follow-ups, so we'll communicate with your staff.
Thank you. This record will remain open for 15 days for any additional comments or questions by any of the subcommittee members. Senator Butler indicated she might have some, and my other colleagues may as well. And again, my thanks for being here, Administrator Whitaker.
Great.
Thank you. And with that,